Welcome to Kitchen Sink Dharma. Now there's a lot of talk about suffering in Buddhist teachings, and some of the language that we encounter can make the whole path seem rather grim. There's all this talk about suffering. The word in Pali is dukkha. It's often translated as suffering or unsatisfactoriness. And it can just make the practice of meditation appear a bit dour and gloomy if you're an outsider particularly. You could be forgiven for thinking that all we're interested in is grief and misery. And today I want to talk about how the opposite is true. I'm really here to talk about joy and its place on the path, because a joyful attitude is very much at the heart of the whole process of waking up. And so is a passionate engagement with life. These moments of awakenings are very much moments of joy. And of course, we're not trying to just get rid of our difficulties so that we can experience joy. We're not pushing things away. We're not pushing stuff away that we don't like so that we can replace it with whatever we think is better. We're not even actually generating joy because it's already there. We're liberating it, if anything, nurturing that capacity in us. And it's not really possible to contrive joy, but we can absolutely make room for it. And you might have noticed yourself that joy won't appear on demand. It just doesn't arise because we want it to arise. It often turns up rather unexpectedly. It comes uninvited, spontaneously. And it's funny that in our culture, joy is very much associated with getting what you want, because our experience shows us that at the very best, that kind of joy is very, very short-lived. As soon as we satisfy one desire, the mind just tends to move on to the next one. So this underlying assumption needs to be really questioned. We spend a lot of time craving, and although that craving can be very compelling, it can be very addictive, it tends to undermine our whole capacity for joy. And also the notion that we can even ever satisfy all of our desires is absolutely absurd. We have to start to see beyond that, and to understand that joy hasn't got very much to do with the pleasure treadmill. And repetitive craving doesn't really contribute anything to our sense of joy and our well-being. As I said, it's something that's already in us. It's waiting to be experienced. And in early Buddhist teachings, joy is spoken about in a number of ways, but always as something that comes within us, always as a capacity. And I want to read out just a short passage from a book by Daniel Ingram called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, which is available online. He writes, "Practitioners who incorporate natural wonder into their practice will do much better, have a much better time, and be much more fun to be around than those who don't. Reconnect with that effortless wonder that children have about themselves and their world. If things get dark, difficult, painful, dull, lifeless, heartless, frustrating, edgy, or boring, reconnect with this meaning of the word rapture. See if you can find something amazing about every moment. You will be glad you did." One of the types of joy that the Buddha taught about is appreciative joy, and the word in Pali is mudita, and it's sometimes translated as sympathetic joy. It's one of the 4 heart practices along with friendliness and compassion and equanimity. Appreciative joy, mudita, is joy that arises at someone else's good fortune, or it can be our own good fortune. So it includes appreciating another person without envy, without comparing or judging, but just simply honouring them, celebrating them. And this is from an 18th century Sinhalese text which was translated by John Peacock. "How wonderful you are in your being. I delight that you are here. I take joy in your good fortune. May your happiness continue." Now you might have noticed that there are certain friends or family members that you really enjoy telling your good news to, because you know that they're going to be really genuinely pleased for you. They're going to be excited for your good news. And those are the people that have a natural capacity for appreciative joy. Now joy is a very necessary companion to compassion, because compassion is about just turning towards the whole immensity of suffering. Suffering in the wider world, suffering with the people around us, suffering in ourselves as well. And when we do that, the heart can become very raw. And joy can be a real balancing factor. It can really help to guard the heart from being overwhelmed and unbalanced. An appreciative joy It's got connotations of tenderness and gentleness and soft-heartedness. And the human mind has this inbuilt tendency to focus on what's wrong, what's negative, what's missing. And joy protects us from this. This will often come up in meditation practice. But joy gives us a bit of a counterbalance to that. And like all of the heart practices, the cultivation of appreciative joy is about learning just to lean towards benevolence, if you like, inclining the mind towards wishing well for other people, just in that direction, wishing happiness for ourselves and other beings, widening our circle of concern. And it's not about denying the difficult or repressing emotions or anything like that. It's just about correcting the brain's natural negative bias. And this kind of joy doesn't necessarily mean states of exhilaration. It's much more stable than that. It's more steady than that. As I've said before, it's inwardly generated joy. So when we're chasing after joy that's based on external conditions, that can really get us into craving. But this doesn't. This is a calm kind of joy. It calms the agitation that's associated with craving. And it really entails a radical shift in our whole relationship with the world around us. And we also talk about joy that's held within gratitude and thankfulness, appreciation. Again, this counteracts our tendency towards negative, towards aversion. It protects us from always focusing on what we haven't got or what's going wrong for us. And as Martin Luther King said, before you finish eating breakfast in the morning, you've depended on more than half the world. We can really show some gratitude even after breakfast. All sorts of ways of practicing gratitude and appreciation. Anything that helps you to recollect your good fortune can be very powerful. And then also, early Buddhist teachings talk about the joy that's found within integrity. So it's about the joy of blamelessness, meaning living a life that's moral, living a life that doesn't accumulate remorse, doesn't accumulate shame or regrets, living in alignment with our values, if you like. It's something that makes us fearless. It removes a great deal of the friction in our lives. And the next kind of joy is interesting. You could call it sensual joy. In other words, joy that arises as a result of sights and sounds and smells and so on. Now, this is regarded by some people, some meditative communities, as a problem. Anything to do with the senses is seen as leading to craving. But again, that's not necessarily true. It's not inevitably going to lead to craving. Things that are lovely, delicious experiences, these are just part of the fabric of all experience. And if we can be open to them, if we can be receptive, if we can bring some appreciation to what we encounter, that's not the same as craving. So an appreciative relationship is not a craving relationship. In a craving or a grasping relationship, what you focus on is what's missing. It's about what you wish was different. There's a sense of lack or insufficiency, or you've got something and you're desperate to hold on to it. Appreciating loveliness doesn't necessarily involve that. It doesn't involve a sense of sufficiency or insufficiency. And trying to cut ourselves off from pleasant sensory appreciation, it's not, that's not a spiritually advanced thing to do at all. I also want to talk about joy that arises in meditation, in meditative states. And sometimes more energetic and blissful states can come up that are associated with deep concentration and meditation. And we're warned against pursuing these states as ends in themselves, but it doesn't make them unworthy. The thing is perhaps not to get too attached to really pleasant, blissful states in meditation so that you start chasing them. Because that's a common pitfall for meditators. If you have a really pleasant sit when you're meditating and then suddenly you want to recreate that every time, it's a problem. But if we can just appreciate the stillness of deep meditation when it happens without feeling that it has to happen every time, without feeling that every time we sit it has to be perfect, again, that can give us a real taste of inwardly generated joy. It gives us confidence about our potential to generate inner happiness. And joy helps us to step out of the mechanisms of craving and into that stillness, into that quietness. And it has a strong relationship with mindfulness, helps us to experience things as new rather than how we think they are. You might have noticed how life appears to move more quickly as you get older. As a child, you might have kept on encountering new things. Adults tend to encounter the same things because we're constantly bringing our past experience into the present moment. And that can strip all the joy out of the present moment just because we're judging it, we're comparing it, we're analysing it. We're saying, yeah, I know what this is. We might even just be ignoring it because our mind is on the next thing. And as the Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck said, joy isn't something we have to find. Joy is who we are if we're not preoccupied with something else. It's just about being present. It's about being mindful. So that preoccupation with something else is often centered around the ego. So we're thinking about whether this is something I like or not. Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Does it make me important or unimportant? Does it offer me something? Does it threaten me? What's coming next? Will that be pleasant or unpleasant? And so on and on and on. It's in our nature to do this. It's rumination about our experience. But it blocks the joy from that moment. It takes it out. It strips it away. And just as it's natural for us to do that and to judge and to plan, just as it's in our nature to engage in this kind of repetitive self-centered thinking, it's also in our nature to be joyful. And joy arises when we let it, when we make room for it. So as soon as we stop generating misery and drama, joy is there, it's right there. We don't have to be doing anything amazing. We don't have to be swimming with dolphins or abseiling off the Grand Canyon. It can come up in the supermarket queue or in our morning cup of coffee. It's when we're stroking the cat, when we're washing the dishes. So that's what I want to say about joy. And thanks for listening, and I hope I'll see you next time.